Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E2 for November 2014. Now I draw your attention to question 6 of the May 2011 exam, but if you're using the BPP text for this current year 2014, then I'd refer you to question 51 on page 21. And this particular screencast concerns the differences between sort of normal project work and business as usual, or indeed normal work. And over and above that, and requirement B here, we're talking about the main sort of roles and responsibilities of a project manager. So quite a commonly examined topic, certainly part B, not so much part A, but just this idea of, what is the role of a project manager and what are the requirements and responsibilities associated with that role. So let me take you through the nuts and bolts of the scenario here. Quite a long one for us, and one or two areas are helpful, others not so much. So we've got P company, a clothing company, and looking to introduce a website to allow customers to purchase their products online. Now this is a large investment, a major investment for the company, and it's critical in a strategic sense because the market is very competitive. Now what they've done in terms of the project team here is they're bringing in a cross-functional team, standard sort of matrix structure, and they've appointed G as the project manager. Now we'll see down below that she's never previously taken on the role, although she has some knowledge in terms of the technical side and experience in website development. She's a little bit concerned about that she doesn't have the skills, and the question focuses in on the sort of roles and responsibilities. So that's really the nuts and bolts here. First part of the question probably could be answered to a large extent without the scenario, and to some extent the part B as well. So let me take you through the answer. So we've got question 6 here. In terms of distinguishing between project work and business as usual or normal work, probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 points that we've got to make sure we include in our answer. And really the first one is perhaps the most obvious one, that really a project is going to have several sets of objectives. We're going to have the requirements relating to the project itself. In other words, I guess the customer or sort of user requirements of scope and indeed quantity, quality, and cost. And then the other side of it, we're going to have the overall organization's objectives of profitability, etc. There must be some element of alignment between those two, or congruence between the two. Okay. Now, in terms of a project, it's going to have obviously a start and end, unlike normal work. Yeah, and that start and end is going to be geared towards those sort of the iron triangle. We're going to need to manage the 3 areas of time and cost and quality over that start and end time. Okay, so a predetermined end date is a key point, unlike normal work, which is in a sense ongoing. Now, a project, point number 3, is a project going to have stakeholders, and obviously business as usual has stakeholders, but a project is going to have stakeholders for a specific period of time. And it's important for us to sort of perhaps just stick in that standard definition of what stakeholders are in any sense, is really that they're going to be affected by or can affect the progress and indeed outcome of the website itself. Okay, or the website project. Okay, so it may well be that under this heading you might want to sort of denote the types of stakeholders that are involved. Now, the obvious one is the sponsor providing resources, perhaps even the steering committee or the board who the PM reports to. Okay, so important if you're mentioning stakeholders, mention who they are. A couple of other possibilities there in terms of the project owner or indeed users concerned. Okay. Now, over and above the stakeholders and defined timescales and start and end, certainly a project is going to go through a series of stages or indeed phases. It has a specific sort of life cycle, as it were, and we know that will start with some sort of identification of a need, followed by some sort of set of choices, as it were, and then implementation of one of those choices, and then obviously completion and review. Okay. In addition to that, or given that, I guess, and given that we have a completion, we have a fixed timescale or a fixed end date, as it were. Okay, and that makes it sort of slightly unusual or different perhaps to normal work. Now, in addition to that, next point, this idea of a specific budget. We've got to have a budget, and that budget certainly needs to be monitored. Part of the planning process is really to set out the activities associated with that budget and indeed all resources, outside of cash, as it were, and that will be part of the PM's responsibility to make sure that that budget figures are closely monitored. Next point here is certainly that a project is unique. We sort of touched on that above, a little bit of overlap between one or two of these points. It's certainly non-repetitive. It will start and finish at a particular time. It doesn't generally involve any sort of routine work, whereas day-to-day business as usual will be to some extent routine. Okay. Final point, and I guess you might say that business as usual work has a certain amount of uncertainty associated with it, but I think what they're saying here is there was just that little bit more degree of uncertainty associated with the uniqueness of particular projects, in this case the website, and the risks that will entail. Okay, so that's the first section dealt with. Part B is fairly straightforward. I'm going to sort of draw your attention to this idea of managers generally and the types of sort of roles and indeed responsibilities that managers have. And then if you can remember that, then just try and tie those points into our sort of iron triangle of time, cost, and quality. So what do they do here? You remember the requirement says, to outline the roles and responsibilities. Well, really the first part here is that, really they're giving us sort of a definition of what a project manager is. And really what they're saying is that she will be ultimately responsible for the delivery of the final website, on time and within budget, and certainly to the established sort of quality requirements of the stakeholders. And then they give us a very sort of broad summary. You'll see that they do this at the end of this answer as well. She'll have a multidisciplinary team, and she'll be responsible for coordinating, managing, controlling, commuting the project tasks. And those 4 words there, really, or 4 verbs, summarize to a large extent what she will be involved in doing. Okay. Now they deal first with this idea of the team. Yeah, we talked about the team up above in terms of key stakeholders, and certainly her role is to manage the team in some way. Okay, and what does that involve? And well, it's going to involve a number of things, including obviously planning and team building and a fair degree of communication. That's going to be important. Communication and indeed coordinating people's jobs and tasks. Okay, over and above that, they talk about the sort of responsibilities to the sponsor. Now we know, or we should know, that the sponsor is really geared to providing sort of resources, and there's the sponsor will be particularly concerned that these resources are used efficiently, whatever they are. Okay. In addition to that, the G will be required to keep the steering committee, or indeed the board, updated as to the project itself and its progress. So communication is key not only with the sponsor but also with the board itself and indeed other stakeholders. Over and above that, a lot of what's included within this answer, to some extent is a little bit of a repetition. You'll see these words repeated over and over again. Coordinating the project by using management tools. Again, we're referring back here to our iron triangle of time, cost, and indeed quality. Again, we talk here about sort of the planning of the work and the organization of the work. Another reference again to resources. Really time, cost, and quality to some extent. Okay, she's definitely going to be responsible for ensuring that the resources are well used and used in line with the sort of the PID, or the constraints outlined within the PID. The project initiation document. Okay, over and above that, given that there's a team involved, clearly assigning tasks to project team members and indeed a certain amount of delegation is going to be responsible. You'll see this mentioned down in this paragraph here about having a cohesive team and what's required to be able to do that. Well, she's going to have to be good at managing, obviously, but also good at making decisions where needed in case of particular problems or issues that any of the team face. Okay. Final couple of points here, just really in terms of repetition of sort of these words. You'll see, coordinating, planning, controlling, implementing, and a reference to successful completion. So again, repetition, as I say. Last paragraph here, they sort of talk about skills, and you weren't specifically asked for those, but in this sort of question, I think it's implicit that given the role concerned, that you need to mention what type of skills that she needed. They specifically mentioned them within their scenario, so I think we can within the answer. And you'll see that what she'll need is obviously strong leadership, team building is mentioned up above, and again, these standard ones that you would probably want to have within any manager, let alone a project manager, with communication, negotiation, etc. Okay, so hopefully that's of help to you. Do have a good look, as I've said before, another screencast in the project manager in particular, skills, roles and responsibilities, and really any questions that you see on this area of the PM, focus in on them, because that's a very, very commonly examined topic. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Thanks for listening. Cheers.